next segment, as stated earlier today, we have a great rapport with the MAV, and our new CEO of the MAV is an apology. She apologises profusely for not being able to be here, but we have the President of the MAV and Mary Lalios. We have Lisa Bennetto, who is the EA of the MAV Technology, and Rosemary Hancock, who is the Manager of Water and Public Health. And for information there, when we approached Rob Spence initially about rural councils, Rob was very supportive with the MAV, and one of our speakers, Rosemary, was our secretariat some 13 or 14 years ago, and she was the first person on board. No money, no nothing, but Rosemary seemed to pull it together very well. So if we could invite the three MAV reps to come up, and we'll leave it to you to sort out your speaking.
Good afternoon, everyone. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here with all of you, and it's great to acknowledge you, Rob, as Chair of RCV, and also I heard him say earlier that there's 100% attendance of all the members, which is absolutely fantastic. From an MAV perspective, we had Rob, Juliana and Michael come and speak to the MAV board a couple of weeks ago, and we allowed 20 minutes on the agenda and actually had a really good discussion for a whole hour. And that's the key message that I want to really say today. That relationship between RCV and MAV, I think, is really critical, and we're really looking forward as a board to working really, really strongly with RCV in really good partnership. We have with us Rosemary, who will be speaking to us about a whole range of things that are coming to us as the MAV in terms of caretaker in how many days, Rosemary? A week and a half of caretaker and all the things that we need to get through during that period. And Lisa will actually be speaking about technology and digital transformation and the key work that we're doing with RCV. Thanks again for the invitation to be here with you. We really look forward to strengthening the partnership between MAV and RCV. And one of the key things that came out of the discussion that we had at our board meeting, a suggestion was made that we possibly could have a ex officio position on RCV to strengthen those relationships, and hopefully that'll only augur well for both of our organisations, our sector and of course our communities. I'll hand over to Rosemary.
Okay, thanks very much. And yes, look, it's great to have an opportunity to give you a very quick update, and I'm very mindful, Rob, I'll take 5 minutes off our presentation. How about that? And yes, look, it's great to reflect on where Rural Councils Victoria has come, because yes, I was involved from those early days when there was no funding whatsoever. And it was a really critical issue at the time of it was the councils with many small towns, declining population, and really trying to grapple with how to grow those local economies, local communities, and retain people living in rural Victoria. And it's actually remarkable in that time, since RCV's had investment from the state, and obviously you've done heaps of projects in that time, of where we are today. I remember, now there's so much more creativity in so many places. I know there's still issues, but it's actually extraordinary where you are now as opposed to 10 years ago. So it's really gratifying, actually, even though I know you've got lots more challenges to address, but change is happening. One of the things that I thought I'd give you a very quick insight to is that we've got a week and a half till caretaker mode kicks in ahead of the upcoming state election. And as always, a lot of things are getting signed off. Now, some of those are fantastic, and it's great because they are getting signed off and they've been eagerly awaited. But from our perspective at the MAV, it's really just to give you some insights at the policy team that things being signed off inevitably mean that there's going to be a lot of devil in the detail as then things are implemented down the track. And my area is, in the water area. And again, that's one of those areas where there's some really exciting things going on and such a commitment from the state, I think, at all political party level, to make sure that water, which is so vital everywhere, is being managed well, supply is okay, particularly now, sort of looking at, drought situations, but also the issues that arise from flooding as well. So it's always the two extremes. We always seem to be in one of them. So it's such a vital area. Some of the things that have been signed off recently are the Victorian Rural Drainage Strategy. Actually, I'll just... we'll get there. Which some of you may have become aware of. At the operational level, there is a role for councils that is a new one. I've briefed the rural and regional forums held by the MAV before about the ongoing nature of its development. Implementation still needs to be rolled out and whatever. It's been very much one of those controversial areas for councils because initially both major parties were saying councils would be the Rural Drainage Authority and that catchment management authorities would not have so much of a role. So we're actually really pleased to see in the final strategy released a couple of weeks ago that CMAs will continue to have a role, particularly where water is always about movement of water over land, and the upstream downstream issues are really important and need to be considered when people are potentially draining land or keeping water on their land as well. So we're quite gratified by that, and it's really come about because of just really constant advocacy on your behalf. So there certainly will be upcoming challenges. There's about 7 pilot projects being undertaken around the state that are underway as we speak. I do alert you though, for those councils in those areas, please do let the MAV know how they're tracking. They're where the CMAs have had vested drainage assets, and some of them are some controversial sort of water management schemes, or not water management schemes, drainage things out there. So we do want to keep on top of that and ensure that the CMAs do continue to have a role. The other thing that I think is going to have implications for councils, and it's really about rural Victoria talking about the pull factors as to why people would come to live and work in rural Victoria, is also it is about the natural environment and there being good regulation by councils who are often the main regulator in these areas. So things like the Environment Protection Act is going to be a major change of policy approach that's now been passed by Parliament. There's 4 working groups that have been set up. They've literally, some of them have started meeting this week. So it's actually there's going to be a lot more emphasis on council's role as, obligations to prevent things happening. And there are going to be a lot more duties on a whole heap of organisations, including councils. So clearly a major change in approach. And again, as the MAV in the policy team, we're sort of having to grapple with that and make sure that the obligations can be achievable or the mechanisms and ways that councils will do that will work. We've also had, it's coming out, I think next week, the State Environment Protection Policy, the Set Waters, which again is going to make some changes and new obligations for councils as we understand it. We haven't seen the final document, but there is a document to those councils and the MAV who's made submissions talking about the government's response to some of the submissions that were made. Seeing that though, we were particularly concerned from a rural council perspective about road runoff and polluted road runoff. There was going to be sort of a lot more obligations on councils to manage that near sensitive waterways. We haven't seen the detail, but looking from the documentation so far, it looks like that's been pulled back slightly to not add new responsibilities that aren't currently there through the Road Management Act. There also is on-site domestic wastewater. I know septic tanks is an issue in many rural areas, and whether it's a water authority providing sewage services to towns, or is it sort of managed privately by landowners. Again, there's been an Auditor General's report come out about that, again, slightly critical. We haven't been worried about that because, in fact, the same issues are there. So to have an Auditor General reaffirm that the issues are still there and that they still need addressing, will certainly help us build the case for attention to some of those details. Again, there's just going to be a lot of work basically over the next year or so, irrespective of who wins government. These things are being put into place statutorily. So again, there's a lot of detail. But look, just a very quick insight to some of our work program. We're buried in the detail, but often the devil is in the detail. So, we'll keep you informed and obviously tap into your expertise as much as we can, because our advocacy is only as good as the information we can sort of pass through. So really just flagging that with you very briefly. It's great to just flag that briefly, and looking forward to working with you over the next year as we get into the detail. So thank you. And I'll now hand over to Lisa, who's going to talk to you about digital transformation. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to speak to you quickly about digital transformation. So digital transformation in councils is driven, of course, by fiscal constraints, which come from a number of areas, rising citizen expectations and rapidly advancing technology. We have common issues. We're observing common issues around all councils, rural councils and metropolitan regional councils. There's barriers to innovation and revenue raising, questions around efficiency in accessing funding grants, high administration costs for back-end functions, deep silos across internal departments. I won't read out the rest. I'm sure you're very familiar with a lot of these problems that councils are experiencing. Happily, our new CEO, Kerry Thompson, has identified this as being a really critical area that we need to be able to help councils address in a more holistic way. So the MAV's digital priorities are going to be to uplift the digital transformation to our digital foundations, our capability and our credibility for all councils. That'll involve engaging experts that we can show, so we can share expertise right across the sector. We'll be improving our digital governance and reforming our business models. So we're looking at the ways that other associations, interstate, overseas, are looking at the technology area and digital area and looking to learn from those experiences. We're going to leverage skills, knowledge and experience of our existing networks, and I've put up there MAV Technology Executive Committee as a terrific example of that. There are now 24 councils represented on the MAV Technology Committee. The people on that committee are digital strategists, CIOs, customer experience experts, and they are very keen to work together to look at how we can help the sector in all the areas that are common to all of us to address those areas. We'll be looking to undertake a discovery and engagement program. This is something that the MAV board endorsed earlier this year, and it involves basically going around to every council and assessing their digital maturity so that we can look for opportunities and priorities in the way that we address the needs. So, for example, if we find that there's technical systems that need to be fixed in certain councils, they might not necessarily be neighbouring councils, we can look to address those problems. If it's leadership guidance that's required, if it's community engagement and education that's required, we'll be able to identify where those needs exist and then target them appropriately. We'll be looking to explore new digital partnership and funding opportunities, and that can mean not only funding from state and federal government, but also private sector partnerships, better partnerships with universities and other associations as well. And we'll be looking at working much more collaboratively with RCV, but also LGV, VLGA, LG Pro. I've had discussions with all of these and other associations. I've had discussions around a more holistic approach to digital transformation with all of these organisations, and we are in furious agreement that we need to do better in this space. So that's what we'll be looking to do. And we want to deliver fast, valuable, visible outcomes for our councils, but also for the communities that they're representing. So with that in mind, we've also been monitoring recently the Rural Council's Transformation Program. The map that I've put up there is my map. I've been ringing around trying to find out who is putting in a bid for this $20 million program that's available for digital transformation in rural areas. The colours that you can see there represent my understanding. It might not be accurate, but that's my understanding of the consortia bids that are likely to be made by mid-November. There are some consortia that have been working together for longer than others that are likely to be much more organised in the way that they put their bids in, and others that are trying to pull things together at the last minute. The issue that the reason that I've done this is I wanted to make sure that all rural councils had an opportunity to get some of this funding to address these problems, and that if there were any common issues that were affecting all of the consortia, that we might be able to help in some way if we could identify what those issues were. So the reason that I think that's important is because if we look at that map, even though it's terrific that these councils are working together to solve some of these problems, or aiming to work together to solve some of these transformational problems, you'll notice that those consortia are still all geographically located. And when you're talking about digital transformation, there's really no reason why a small rural council in one part of the state couldn't partner with a small rural council in another part of the state. They might, in fact, have much similar needs than they do with their regional neighbour. So we want to look for those opportunities as well, and at least not overlook those opportunities, so that we can address some of these issues that exist for all councils and hold us back as a sector. So in looking at the Rural Council Transformation Program likely applications, one of the things that we have identified is that we think that there's a number of aspects that are going to be critical for all of those consortia, and we think that there could be a role for the MAV in partnership with RCV, LG Pro, all the associations that I mentioned before, to look at de-risking the transformation processes for councils, and including these regional consortia that are putting these bids in for this program next month. So all of these transformation programs, no matter what they're targeting, will require some change management. They'll require leadership, education and coaching. In the technical ones will need data architecture, strategy and analysis. So we're looking at what if we were able to create a rural council transformation centre that offered all of these resources to the consortia that are putting in these bids, but also to individual councils as well, so that we share the resources, look at sharing skills, developing skills in a more cohesive and coordinated way, look at best practice for community engagement tools, have a look at our governance partnerships and procurement arrangements and provide advice along those lines, and also perhaps look at a shared data management platform so that we can improve interoperability and application, integration, and collaboration between the consortia. So when they're developing different things, if we've got some way that we can connect them better, it's going to enable those consortia to grow, if you like. Other councils might be able to join the initiatives that they've developed, and it'll also enable us to create a more visible ecosystem, digital ecosystem for the sector. So that's what we're doing at the moment, and the way that I'm going to progress that over the next couple of weeks, because time is really tight as it is, the deadline's November the 15th. So I'll be approaching all the lead councils, the CEOs of all the lead councils of the consortia that I put up before, and asking them, A, if they think that this type of transformation centre could be of use to them, and if so, then I would ask them if they would like to either support an EOI bid being made by the MAV, or do we just put the identification of these needs in all the existing bids? So, and I'll be guided by the CEOs about which way they think is the best way to proceed with it, but that's the discussion that we'll be having over the next couple of weeks as the consortia work out where they're positioned with their bids. The opportunities that can come from having better coordinated approach to transformation, but particularly enabled by digital, is listed on the wall there. I won't read them out, but I think the rewards are really great. It's worth pursuing. Thank you.